Over the course of the Clone Wars, we all saw the Clone Army in action. The brutally effective fighting force with an intense training regiment that had been basically training since birth for combat, but we really only see little bits and pieces of the training on Kamino, and it might not give the best idea of what that training was like, so I figured today we could dive deeper into how training on Kamino worked, and what it would be like growing up as a clone trooper on Kamino and being trained to fight in a variety of different environments. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. Now, we do see quite a bit of Kaminoan training during the Clone Wars TV show. There's whole arcs surrounding clone troopers coming up and becoming the soldiers needed by the Republic. So it may give the impression that we've seen quite a bit of Kaminoan training, and on top of that, we see it in games like Republic Commando, even though that's Legends, and it all seems to look pretty much the same. The very sterile environments of Kaminoan cities, with some loose droid representation or some moving targets for them to shoot at, or maybe some maneuver training on a large, empty metal room. But it's actually much more complex than that, and if we dive into cross-sections of Tipoca City, we can really see that, and that's going to be sort of the core of what we're doing today. So let's just talk a little bit about this. So like any good military force, the Clone Army was being prepared to fight in basically all environments, from freezing cold to boiling hot, from incredibly damp to incredibly dry, from the cleanest interior of a big military facility to the muddiest jungles, and you just can't train a military force to do that in an entirely sterile environment that exposes them to no environmental hardship like what you would expect to see on the battlefields of a conflict like the Clone Wars. And the Kaminoans knew this, and they specifically designed their facilities to be able to provide that kind of training, the kind of training that would be needed for a massive army that was going to fight a galactic war. We see when we look at the cross-sections of Tipoca City that beneath the big sterile environments that we see on screen in movies like Attack of the Clones, there is actually a sprawling network of various chambers designed to replicate a variety of different environments, from the cold, snowy environments seen in battles like the Battle of Ren Var, to deserts like what we see on Tatooine, which, albeit there was never a battle there during the Clone Wars, but still, you get the point. These environments were designed on these moving platforms that could be raised or lowered and modified to provide different terrain, and these were vast empty spaces that could be used to simulate any kind of battle conditions involving things like vehicles, ATTEs, and even gunships in some of these likely could have been used because these rooms were just massive. And what these rooms allowed the Kaminoans to do was subject the clone troopers to environments that they would see on battlefields, from freezing plains to scorching deserts, from muddy jungles to clean cities. And honestly, for the clean cities, they could just use the open spaces that we see on screen time and time again. Things like, for example, the trial that we see clone troopers run through during the Clone Wars, the TV show, showing them going through the later stages of training. Now, it's likely that this is just one of the many environments, and perhaps maybe one of the more challenging, as it is designed specifically to be assaulting a fort, but even then, it's still very different from, say, fighting on Fallujah. Now, this system of sort of these interior spaces that could be climate controlled to be whatever they needed them to be actually solved another problem that the Kaminoans faced when designing and training the Grand Army of the Republic, and that was keeping them a secret. They couldn't go on field trips to elements of the galaxy to experience combat on training facilities on far-off worlds. It had to be entirely self-contained on Kamino, and entirely self-contained on a few facilities on Kamino, so that it could be kept in secrecy. As a result, those facilities had to be converted to be whatever they needed to be, which is why these chambers that could shift their terrain and modify their weather conditions were so valuable to training clone troopers. And while we don't ever see these simulation chambers on screen, I think we do see them referenced in a rather memeable quote from the original Star Wars Battlefront 2. During the Battle of Geonosis, one of the lines we hear clone troopers say is just like the simulations. Well, if we look at the training on Kamino that we see on screen, it doesn't even come close to the Battle of Geonosis, which means there must have been more to it than just what we saw on screen, which is where these climate control rooms come in. It's also worth noting that beyond these training rooms, there was definitely shooting galleries, which we do often see on screen. There were these sort of more urban challenge environments made out of these shifting environments that we see during the Clone Wars, and there was probably a pretty substantial classroom side of this as well that would teach soldiers battlefield tactics. Everyone down to the lowest rank need to know how to perform basic maneuvers on the battlefield, lest they end up separated or there's a shuffle in the chain of command in combat. All of these things together would form the intense training regimen that clone troopers went through in preparation for their service with the Grand Army of the Republic. And the clone troopers had that vast base of knowledge going into what was one of the largest wars the galaxy ever saw, but they would ultimately end up being replaced. The clone troopers would be replaced by recruited stormtroopers, and that's a relatively controversial decision that the Empire made in its early days. If you'd like to learn about some of the reasons why the Empire made the switch from the intensely trained clone troopers to recruited soldiers that have less specialized and lengthy training processes, I'll leave a link up here to my video on that. And I'd like you to let me know down in the comments if you would have liked to see these training facilities in the Clone Wars or some other Clone Wars era piece of on-screen media, or do you think it's fine that we just see these in cross-sections and assume they're there elsewhere? And if you have anything else you'd like to see me cover in Star Wars or anywhere else in science fiction, you can let me know down below in the comments. Last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.